Imine 36 na Legislature in Guam is called to order. Buenas, colleagues. We will begin this morning with a prayer, and I call upon Father Paul Goffigan, our chaplain, to lead us in prayer this morning. Please rise.
Before we begin our morning prayer this morning, let us take a moment in silence to remember our brother, Father Gus Gumatautau, who passed away early this morning. He was a friar of the Order of Friars Minor, Capuchin. He served as a pastor of Sinahanya for a while, and he also served as a former chaplain of the Guam Legislature. Eternal rest grant unto Father Gus, O Lord. May he rest in peace. May his soul and the souls of all the faithful departed rest in peace. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Listen now to a passage taken from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 7, verses 31 to 35. Jesus left the district of Tyre and went by way of Sidon to the Sea of Galilee, into the district of the Decapolis. And people brought to him a deaf man who had a speech impediment and begged him to lay his hand on him. He took him off by himself, away from the crowd. He put his finger into the man's ears and, spitting, touched his tongue. Then he looked up to heaven and groaned and said to him, Ephphatha, that is, be opened. And immediately the man's ears were opened, his speech impediment was removed, and he spoke plainly. Almighty Father, as we begin this session, we cry out to you, Ephphatha, and ask your Holy Spirit to invade our hearts and minds with your powerful love, so that our ears may be open to listening with love. Our eyes will be open to see your Son in each other. Our mouths be open to speak with charity and truth, and our hands be open to embrace the work you have purposely planned for us. All in all, we ask you to give success in the work we do for your glory and for the good of our people. We ask this through our Lord Jesus Christ, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Thank you, Polly. We are now going to recognize a recipient of Imaladan Mastakilu na Sakrifisu. This award was established in 2010 and presented to the family members of individuals killed in action in World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, Operation Desert Storm, the War on Terror, and other actions. We have a roll of the recipients displayed in the Congress building, and at each of our sessions, at this part of the agenda, we recognize one of these recipients. For the recognition of a recipient of Imaladan Mastakilu na Sakrifisu, Senator Anthony Ada, you are recognized.
On behalf of a grateful island and country, we honor Native Seaman Second Class, World War II, Pedro T. Sablan, and the family of Native Seaman Second Class Pedro T. Sablan for making the ultimate sacrifice in service and defense of our island and country.
For the reciting of the Inifresi, I recognize Legislative Secretary Senator Amanda Shelton.
Inifresi, ginini mastakilu gi hinasoku, imastakilu gi corazonhu, zani maspigu nanina sinyahu, hua fresin maisatu, parabai protehi, zanhu defendi, I hanengi, I kultura, I lenguahi, I airi, I hanum zanitanu tomorrow. Near and shoku diretsu gininazuas tata, esti hua fitma gihilo I biblia, zani benderahu I benderan guahan.
Would Senator Chris Duenas please lead us in the singing of the Guam hymn, and Senator Joe San Augustine please lead us in the singing of the national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripe and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land and of the free and the home of the brave?
Situs Masi, please be seated. Madam Clerk, please take roll.
Senator Atta, Senator Blas, Senator Brown, Senator Duenas, Senator Moylan, Vice Speaker Munya Barnes,
Manana Situs Kagya,
Senator Nelson, Senator Perez, Senator Ragel, Senator San Augustine, Senator Shelton, Senator Taitagui, Senator Terlahi, Speaker Terlahi,
Gagizu.
Senator Torres. Madam Speaker, there is a quorum.
Situs Masi, Madam Clerk. Majority Leader, Senator Nelson, you are recognized on the approval of the legislative journals.
Madam Speaker, good morning. I move to approve the legislative journal dated January 4, 2021, subject to corrections.
There's a motion to approve the legislative journal dated January 4, 2021. Are there any objections? If there are no objections, motion carries. Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, there are communications and petitions, and I move that they be appended to today's session journal.
On the motion that communications and petitions appended to today's session journal be approved, are there any objections? No objections, motion carries. Senator Nelson, you're recognized.
Sijusmasi, Madam Speaker, there are messages from Imagahagan Guahan, and I move that they be appended to today's session journal.
On the motion that messages from Imagahagan Guahan be appended to today's session journal, are there any objections? Hearing no objections, motion carries. Majority Leader Senator Nelson, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, there are reports of standing committees, and I move that they be appended to today's session journal.
On the motion that reports of standing committees be appended to today's session journal, are there any objections? Hearing no objections, motion carries. Majority Leader Senator Nelson, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, there are no reports of select committees.
Thank you. Senator Nelson.
Madam Speaker, I move that bills introduced, bill numbers 1-36LS and 2-36LS and 3-36COR through 57-36COR, and resolutions introduced, resolution number 1-36COR through 17-36COR be deemed to have been given their first reading.
On the motion of the first reading and introduction of bills and resolution, is there any objection? Hearing no objection, motion carries. We're now in motions. Majority Leader Senator Nelson, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, I move to excuse senators not present for today's legislative session.
On the motion, are there any objections? Hearing no objections, motion carries. Senator Nelson, you are recognized.
I move that all congratulatory, commendatory, and condolence resolutions introduced today and for the remainder of this legislative session be considered first read and adopted to allow the Legislative Council to make technical corrections and to add all senators as co-sponsors.
On the motion, are there any objections? Hearing no objections, motion carries. We are in legislative concurrences. Vice Speaker Munya-Barnes, you are recognized.
Sijus Masi, Madam Speaker, and Manana Sijus. I move to place in the voting file from the Committee of Public Accountability, Human Resources, the Guam Build-Up, Hagåtña Revitalization, Regional Affairs, Public Libraries, Telecommunications and Technology, the nomination of Nolan G.T. Flores to serve as a member, the student representative of the Guam Public Library Systems Board of Directors with the recommendation to do confirm, Madam Speaker.
On the motion to place the nomination of Nolan G.T. Flores in the voting file, are there any objections? Hearing no objections, motion carries. We are now in the second reading file. The first bill on our agenda in the second reading is Bill number 24-36. Senator Moylan, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move to place Bill number 2436, core, to the session agenda. Okay, a third reading file. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Can you please read the amended title of the bill?
Yes, Madam Speaker. Bill number 2436 is an act to amend subsection 3.
Sorry, Senator Moylan. I think we have to recognize it as Bill number 24-36 CR as amended by the committee. That, if you could read that out as well.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Bill number 2436 core as amended by Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation, Labor, Procurement and Statistics, Research and Planning is an act to amend subsection 3105 of Article 1, Chapter 3, Title 22, Guam Code Annotated, relative to redating the implementation of the second tier of Public Law 3538 from March 1st, 2021 to March 1st, 2022. And I'd like to discuss, Madam Speaker.
All right, and your motion is to place this on the third reading, Senator Moylan, is that correct?
Yes, Madam Speaker, to place on third reading file. Thank
All right.
you.
Yes, you may begin to debate the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, colleagues. And I want to say from the start, this measure does not repeal the law that provided two-tier increase of the minimum wage. This measure simply redates the implementation of the second tier of the minimum wage increase adopted in 2019. It changes the date from March 1st, 2021 to March 1st, 2022 by a year. If this was another year, we would not be having this conversation today. But this isn't any other year. Just as the rest of the world, our island is facing an economic crisis like no other. While no one disagrees with the idea that we need to pay island residents more, the reality is that many businesses are still trying to adjust to the situation. Some are still not even sure if they will be able to reopen their doors. A story in the Guam Daily Post just reported that over 1,000 business licenses were renewed. So colleagues, we need to get more island residents back to work. And Bill 24 is a simple step in ensuring that those hundreds of struggling businesses are not hammered with another government mandate. They need breathing room, and this measure provides some oxygen. Yes, I understand that our people could use an extra funds. But in some cases, many cases, our people want a job to go back to, and I don't blame them. Now, Bill 24 may not guarantee anything, but it will provide small businesses some breathing room so they can bring more island residents back to work. Will we be back to normal in a year? I don't know. None of us do. But the realistic timeline for some turnaround opportunities need to take place. And now, I get it. There are discussions in Congress to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. But as of today, February 12, 2021, it is just a discussion. Will that measure pass? I don't know. None of us in this room know what will happen in the halls of Congress, but I do know that we can determine what happens with the minimum wage here on Guam on March 1st, 2021. This we can control. And I ask for your support so we can make a much-needed discussion and decision. If Congress ends up passing a measure at some point and the president enacts it into law, well, we'll deal with that situation when it comes. But today, none of us have a crystal ball to determine that fate. So, please don't get me wrong. I'm not excited about this measure, and this wasn't an issue I campaigned on. Heck, I voted for the measure in 2019 that created a two-tier increase in the minimum wage. But I also recognize that as elected officials, we agree to make tough decisions. And this is one of those moments when we had to make a very tough decision. I've spoken to business leaders. I've discussed this issue with human resource personnel. I've had conversation with business organizations. And Bill 24 is a much needed proposal at this time. Because we need to jumpstart our economy. And that starts with more island residents getting back to work. So let's allow this to happen. I thank you, Madam Speaker, and I urge my colleagues to please consider supporting this measure. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On Bill number 24-36, is there anyone wishing to speak on the bill? Senator Brown, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to speak on this bill. I have a slightly different perspective, and it's one that I was not here in the previous legislature to vote on this two-tiered bill. And obviously, as a result of this pandemic, we certainly have seen the adverse economic consequences to our community, where many have either lost their hours or in some cases, as we know, lost their jobs. I have reservation with regards to tinkering with addressing the minimum wage issue, primarily because I feel that minimum wage is something that the dynamics of the economy can address. And the previous legislature decided that they were going to do a two-tier process, one where we raise it by 50 cents to go up to $8.75 with the anticipated raise of an additional 50 cents a year later. And of course, now we find ourselves in this pandemic. And maybe as mentioned by the sponsor, Senator Moylan, perhaps if the federal government addresses an even higher increase to $15 an hour, the impact to the economy overall is going to be quite adversely significant. There's always such a tendency in the legislature, and not just here, but in many places, including the US Congress, to appear as if we're Santa Claus, taking money out of people's pockets and giving it back to them, and then telling them what a wonderful thing we've done to enhance their quality of life. I look at every time we tinker with the minimum wage that we feel a need to increase it rather than allowing the economy of scale itself to address this, because let's recognize these positions. We're essentially talking about entry-level positions with the hope that eventually a good employee is going to continue to work in their career and they're going to continue to move up and continue, hopefully, in their work to increase their income. I do want to ask a question before I conclude my comments, but I did want to ask of the sponsor, do we know, if I can, Madam Speaker, if the sponsor will yield, how many people in our community here right now are we talking about with regards to those that would be impacted by this minimum wage rollback instead of implementing the additional 50 cents next month in the month of March?
Will the sponsor, Senator Moylan, yield to the question?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you to my colleague. I don't have the official documents to answer that question, but I have recalled reading articles roughly around, I believe it's 3,000 or less of that in consideration of that. However, we're also talking about 26,000 as reported by Department of Labor who have qualified for PUA. Because of the pandemic. So, there's triple or more that are unemployed or reduced hours when faced with this pandemic. So those are the figures I have, but I can't say for sure an actual quote from any agency that has provided that. Thank you, Madam Chair, or Speaker, thank you.
Madam Speaker, I just have one other question. If the sponsor will yield, do we know, for example, how many people are earning maybe $9 an hour now? We're talking $8.75, maybe impacted perhaps by 3,000. Do we know how many people are earning $9 an hour, $9.25 an hour?
Senator Moylan, will you yield to the question by Senator Brown?
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, colleague. The question being, are there more with the higher than the minimum wage that we are projecting? Yes. The majority of those employed are above minimum wage entry level. And if I can just add, Madam Speaker, that this measure does not stop any employee wishing to give higher than minimum wage to their employees, right? As a new employee comes on board eventually when they open their doors. So it doesn't prevent any employer from doing so. It just offers at least the employer to have that opportunity, if so decided, if their business is successful when reopening their doors after this pandemic, in addition to all the costs they have to absorb based on the health health screening and the taking your temperature and providing the alcohol and so forth, and keeping things clean as required by Department of Public Health and Social Services. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for allowing me the opportunity to ask those questions of the main sponsor. I just bring this up to light because, again, I have reservation, and certainly had I been here previously, or if this issue were to be brought to me now, I have reservations about the legislature interjecting with regards to the minimum wage and not allowing the natural economies of scale in our community to address this issue. I think it's unfair to our people, especially those that are earning minimum wage, to give them the hope that we are the ones who are going to be the ones to give them that additional increase in their salary without recognizing that we continue to contribute to the inflation in this community. We give someone an additional 50 cents increase, and then that multiplies additional cost of services, additional costs to goods that our people purchase in the supermarket, and it simply increases the amount of what we end up having to spend in our individual home budgets to be able to purchase the very same services under the guise that we are giving our people more money. Certainly, I really hope that the desired increase by the current Biden administration does not come into play, because for our little island community to deal with a $15 minimum wage, the implications to our economy, to our employees will be devastating. Because all of a sudden now you're going to end up having employers that are going to have to cut the amount of people that are working for them, and imagine the cost of a gallon of milk or a slice of bread in this economy because of the impact, because we want to very much appear that we are giving our people something. We need to think as we make these type of decisions that have significant impact on our economy. And I'm looking at the other side of the point, because I think we all recognize, we all see what is going on as a result of this pandemic that's affected particularly our private sector and particularly our tourism industry when we inject ourselves in the process. This bill and this action today is a sign of our unintended consequences, because the previous legislature decided they wanted to do an increase and then moved another increase to a year ahead. And look, surprise, look at where we're at today. So I just hope moving forward that we're a lot more conscientious about what we're doing with regards to legislation, so that we don't continue to use our people like ping pong balls back and forth. And now here we are today to change an action of a previous legislature to implement a 50-cent increase that I'm sure those in minimum wage very much would like to see. Even though I know, and I'm sure many of us here know, that all we're simply doing is increasing the overall cost to our economy rather than allowing the dynamics of our private sector to do what they know they need to do, and they have the expertise to do that. So I recognize certainly what the intent is because of our current economy. But again, I just want to leave the note to hopefully moving forward that we're a lot more mindful when we inject ourselves with regards to addressing the minimum wage here in our community. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to comment on this bill.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Senator San Augustine, you're recognized on Bill 24-36.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just for information purposes, I have a copy of a letter from the University of Guam that would answer my colleague's question in reference to the wages that our people of Guam are receiving. And if we can take a minute so that we can have this recess and have this circulated, I just wanted that to be presented to everyone, and everybody will have an understanding of that one. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
All right, and then will you be speaking on it, Senator?
The only thing I have, Madam Speaker, is that number one, I'm not in support of the bill, but I want this to be presented to all so everybody can understand why I don't support it. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll have that presented to all the senators, please. All right, so colleagues, while we're waiting for those copies of that document to be uploaded, I just want to remind you, so the clerks is going to be uploading the bill. Please refresh your bill regularly on the drive. We are going paperless here today, so on the drive for the bill, refresh it. And for the floor amendments is where we will put all the additional documents. On the floor amendment folder for this bill is where we're going to add all those additional documents, including floor amendments. So please refresh. We'll take a 1-minute recess until that is uploaded. We're in recess. Okay, colleagues, we're back from recess. Please refresh your floor amendments folder on bill number 24-36 COR. Refresh your floor amendments folder on the drive on bill 24-36 floor amendments folder. You should see the document referred to by our senator from Jigo. Senator San Agustin, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My colleagues, if you look at the letter presented by Dr. Jones from the University of Guam, as you look down further, and I think one of the questions raised by my colleagues is, what are some of the rates? The lowest paying today is a food preparation and serving related position at $10.20. The minimum wage increase is only up to $9.25. And if you look at the letter, the wage increase to $9 represent an increase of $4 per day, $20 per week for full-time workers. If you think that's going to allow the business to hire more employees, that has been, I guess, portrayed by the author of this bill, I'm telling you right now that it's not. And exactly, the market will decide the rate of the employees. And they have decided it's $10.20. That's currently what they're paying right now. So all I'm saying is that I'm in support of keeping the minimum wage to increase to $9.25 on March, and then we'll move from there. If any other changes need to be made, we have several bills that are on the floor that's going to be adjusting a lot of things from taxes and everything, so that will adjust the market. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Duenas, you're recognized on Bill 24-36.
Jesus Masi, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to speak on Bill 2436. You know, when the author approached me to consider to co-sponsor this bill, you know, one of my first initial reactions was to think about, you know, what really is the overall impact of this suspension for a couple of years. The other thing is, of course, you know, Madam Speaker, I know that probably during this session, at least with regards to 2 or 3 bills that are on the agenda, I'll be talking about the Chamber of Commerce. And it's not because the Chamber of Commerce is the be-all, end-all, but it's because of the fact that in my research of their organization, there is sometimes a thought that the Chamber of Commerce is some sort of Guam is some sort of ivory tower with all these multi-million-dollar corporations. But if you really look at the Chamber, a large percentage of the businesses that are with the Chamber and registered with the Chamber are small businesses. And so, to me, they were the ones who actually came to the legislature and came to other, you know, individual senators and asked. And they've been very forward in their advocacy for this bill. Madam Speaker, we're going to be talking about the government of Guam soon. In terms of, you know, our government employees, we're going to be haggling over a budget in the weeks, months coming up and going into the summer. We're going to have to deal with that. So we'll be talking about our government. We'll be talking about our government employees. We'll be talking about services to our people. You know, my good colleague from Ordat, Talampago, and she has a good point in terms of a commitment that we made, and then we're going in now and pulling this back. And it's a tough thing to do, and it's not popular. But one of the things I wanted to express as well is there was some conversation about the fact that, you know, the minimum wage, market forces, things that influence, you know, what compensation employees, particularly at the entry level, get. But one thing that is commonly left out is that when you raise a minimum wage, it is not just that entry-level employee that might be at minimum wage or the new employee who will come on board, but is all the employees up the scale from there that most businesses will have to adjust. So it is not just the 50 cents that was implemented last year and then this proposed 50 cents, but it will be the employers who more than likely will have to adjust all the way up when it comes to the scale of their employees, because it just doesn't seem fair that you're basically giving a raise to all of those individuals who are currently at minimum wage. You're raising the entry-level wage. I think most businesses, you know, having good practices and compensating their employees properly will have to adjust the scale going all the way up. So the impacts are just not the wage itself. The impacts, I believe they basically, the term that business people use is compression. And so there is a compression factor to this as well. Once again, this is not a popular decision. I know that the governor is currently in the media saying that she will weigh what she would do with this bill after the deliberation on the floor, and should it arrive on her desk. So I think everybody is giving careful thought to this. But I think in closing, Madam Speaker, I think as the author said, this is a very difficult time right now that we're in. And I agree with the author. More than likely, this actually would not have been introduced if we weren't in the situation we're in right now, and businesses are just trying to hang on as much as they can, particularly with the lockdowns and the closures and the slow pace of reopening. You know, they're trying to hold on. They're trying to keep their business alive. They want to bring employees back as we continue to open. And so I look at it as giving a little bit of help to them for a temporary period of time. But Madam Speaker, I'm interested to hear the balance of the deliberation and go in and look at the information from the University of Guam. But thank you for the opportunity to share a few of my thoughts on this issue, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On Bill number 24-36, would anyone like to be recognized? Senator Blas, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to be able to speak on Bill 24-36. You know, Madam Speaker, as a co-sponsor to this piece of legislation, I'd like to be able to tell you that this wasn't something that that you really jumped to. My sponsorship of this legislation actually took some very careful and diligent thinking, planning, researching, and coming up with this decision necessary to say I was going to co-sponsor it. And part of that process was thinking about where we were at about this time last year, or if you can imagine where we were at the time that I needed to make the decision on whether to sponsor the legislation. Obviously, you know, at the time that the previous legislation, the legislation mandating the gradual and incremental increase to the minimum wage, it was at a time when we were looking at growing our economy. It was at a time when we were looking at making sure that, you know, the competition was healthy. At a time when we felt that, you know, our employees, those individuals that were the ground pounders, were the ones who churned the butter and who did, you know, a lot of the tasks necessary to grow a business, that we can provide them that compensation. Today, Madam Speaker, we're looking at ways that we can try to make sure that businesses survive. We're looking at ways to try to bring our economy back up so that businesses can stay open, and so that people can remain employed. As we speak, Madam Speaker, somewhere on this island there is a line of individuals who are seeking for help, seeking for assistance, because there is no job. And in that process, we're trying to find ways to be able to help the economy, help those drivers of the economy continue to sustain themselves. Another thing that I need to mention is that while this legislation suggests or says that, look, can we put a pause on this increase? First off, it doesn't say that an employer can't provide their employees above $9.25. What it is saying is that if business wants to continue to stay alive, there's not a mandate that they would have to increase their cost for right now, because they can't. And we're not asking that this halt or that this next increment to this raise is never going to happen. This is asking just for time so that we can get the economy back on track. Maybe the timing of this legislation isn't, I know why we're talking about it now, because the increase, the next step, is basically slated for next month. But had that not been the case, maybe this kind of legislation would have been better acceptable, if you will, for lack of a better term, if we also had to, it was in the midst of the deliberations of other measures that eventually this body is going to have to deal with because of a downturn in the economy. Nobody knew at the time the original legislation was being deliberated or crafted that this was going to be the case today. Nobody knew at the time that we crafted this, that we submitted this legislation for consideration, Bill 24-36, that the president was going to make an announcement about $15 an hour. That's another conversation that we're going to need to have, or probably need to have down the road. That would make this whole thing moot. But I can imagine what the conversations are going to be like then. So, Madam Speaker, I know this is a tough decision. But that's what the people of Guam elected us to do, is to make those tough decisions. My father once told me, remember, what's right is not always popular, and what's popular is not always right. So I ask my colleagues for consideration in this. It's not pretty, but I venture to say that we're going to have to deal with more uglier things in this hall as the days go by. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. We're on Bill number 24-36. Would any of my colleagues like to be recognized? Senator Torres, you're recognized.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to express my support for Bill 24-36, which I am also a co-sponsor of. And I want to draw everybody's attention, if they can, to the testimony at the public hearing. It was very hard to sit through and listen to the testimony provided and not have some concern and desire to help the small businesses who are struggling to stay alive. Many of them describe that it's not a matter of survival. They are barely hanging by a thread. Some of them had to close some of their branches of business because they simply couldn't withstand one more added cost to their already struggling businesses. While in looking at the University of Guam testimony by Rosanna Jones, I don't dispute her suggestions or her concerns and recommendations. I do want to note, though, that a lot of it is geared towards the worker. But in this instance, I think it's important to contextualize the impact within the interest of the businesses who are the hands that indeed feed these people, that provide them jobs. While one line in this letter reads that businesses, of course, do have the ability to lay off workers or to reduce hours, that is, in fact, what these businesses fear. That any increase at this critical time when they're barely hanging on is going to result in their having to lay off workers or reduce hours, which to them is a loss, because their ultimate goal is to thrive, and to thrive by having employees who are working in adequate, suitable, and more ideal circumstances than adverse circumstances. And what I also want to point out is, in thinking about delaying the increase for 1 year, and that's what this bill essentially does. It doesn't take away from a wage increase. It just delays it to allow the businesses to recover or to stay alive in this COVID environment. What was especially noteworthy in a lot of the testimony that I got from the public hearing was that many of these businesses did not avail of assistance. And, you know, they had very little reprieve from the catastrophic economic downturn. So I would have us consider that, because there's always two sides to everything, but the ability to provide jobs cannot be discounted. And any policy that we have that can facilitate businesses to survive in this small island economy of ours, I think is a duty that we have to look at seriously and with compassion and with an open mind. So I support this bill. I think that with all factors going and with uncertainty about what the economic aid is going to look like in the months to come, because we don't expect even tourism to recover for the next at least 6 months to start, we have to at least give our businesses the ability to hang on, if even to that tiny thread that is keeping them alive. So if we can delay it for a year, give them some time, then all the better, because from what I saw, and I didn't even offer any words, Madam Speaker, at that public hearing, because I felt that I could not say anything that was more impactful than what was already presented into testimony. So with that, I ask my colleagues to, please consider, for the sake of our businesses who are just begging us at this point for our consideration, to delay what would be an aid to facilitate them, where aid is very minimal to them right now in this COVID environment. Sidus Masi.
Sidus Masi. Vice Speaker Munya Barnes, you are recognized on Bill 24-36.
Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to just share some of my thoughts on this measure and whether I would support or not support the measure, knowing that I always believe that if we pay our people their fair share, that our community will be a better place, right? Because our residents will be able to support the livelihoods of their family. And some of the takeaways that were worked with me when the committee report was looked at with the discussions at the public hearing, some of the questions that were asked and some of the concerns that I had was maybe I could find some answers to this, or maybe I could look in recent reportings. And so let me share some thoughts. One of the questions I think one of our previous colleagues asked was, what is the number of minimum wage workers we currently have in our workforce? And as we looked into it further, based on the Department of Labor, Bureau of Labor and Statistics, minimum wage impact estimates the number of employees at below wage of $8.75 per hour under all occupations was at 3,460. And then, and that was based on a survey that was done in the year 2018 and then released later in May of 2019. And then earlier this year, in January of 2021, the PDN article said that there were about 3,000 people here on the island that earn minimum wage. And my thought is, can we look at an economic impact study in this legislation right now, or can we look at it be included in a bill moving forward? And I know that Gita talked about the resources of if a study were to be done or not, that there would be a large expense to look at. And Madam Speaker, I also looked at, okay, what is Guam doing based on what Congress is working on right now with the minimum wage looking to increase to $15 an hour. And if we were to pass this measure, Madam Speaker, when would be the right time for us to increase the minimum wage, even if it was for a year, with the uncertainty of Guam's economy coming back to play, right? We have over 20,000 folks, 20 to 30, if I'm not mistaken, based on the Department of Labor, that are out of a job. So I said, okay, if I were looking at supporting this measure for a temporary hold, could we come up with a medium instead of the 1 year, based on what the stimulus package or economic relief stimulus that might be coming our way, and working with our tourism industry and the president and the chairman of the Economic Recovery organization saying, you know, we're looking at reopening in April, that maybe we can come up with a resolve and maybe come up with a compromise instead of a year to bring it down to 6 months on a moratorium, right? So, Madam Speaker, in the efforts of trying to think on both, because I was one who supported an increase, right, for our people, because I believe that we must give the opportunity for our people to support the livelihoods of their family and for themselves. So I was saying maybe we can look at a resolve or a middle resolve so that it could be worked for both sides, right? Those are for and those who are against. So in my efforts, Madam Speaker, if the good author is willing to at least converse, and maybe we can take a little break just to see, you know, maybe I can ask for that, because I'd like to proffer the amendment, but no use working on it if it's not going to go through. So I didn't bring this up to anybody, Madam Speaker. I was just hoping that if there was a way to help the business community, but more importantly, help our people, knowing that the impact right now, based on the information that I got, and I want to thank my policy team for always literally working 24/7, because, you know, every time I have a question, it's like, get on the bow, and I need the answer yesterday. I'd like to see how I can work on something. So if you can allow me that brief moment, recess, at least to talk to the author of the measure and maybe work with my colleagues and see where we can come to a fair middle ground, I'd like to see that. I'd like to at least try. So if you can afford me that opportunity, Madam Speaker, I would at least like to bring it up.
All right, we're going to take a 2-minute recess. We're in recess for 2 minutes.
Thank you.
Members, we are back in session, back from recess. Vice Speaker Munya Barnes, you are recognized.
Sizos Masi, Madam Speaker. And you know, Madam Speaker, I was talking to the author of the legislation and some of my colleagues, and at this time, Madam Speaker, based on that, I want to proffer amendment, but I'd like to yield to the Legislative Secretary for the amendment, as she already has an amendment in reference to my issue of concern. And what I would do is, if I may, Madam Speaker, yield to the Secretary, because she's already got that. She'll include me as a co-sponsor to her amendment to take the timeline from 1 year down to 6 months. So thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to speak. But more importantly is for me is trying to see how I can help my colleague to support this measure in its entirety. And I'm hoping that this middle ground will do good for both of us. So thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'd like to yield to the Legislative Secretary to proffer that amendment.
All right, so thank
okay.
you. Thank you. And on the bill, Legislative Secretary Shelton, you are recognized.
On the amendment.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. The amendment was sent in to the clerks. We sent it in as the prime sponsor being the Vice Speaker. So when you read the amendment, it'll read as sponsored by TMB and ALS.
All right, Senator, if you could just pause then. Everyone, please refresh your drives under floor amendment, the floor amendment folder for Bill 24-36. Please refresh and you will see an amendment there. Okay, please proceed, Senator Shelton.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. And the bill, the amendment to the bill is quite simple, as the previous speaker had mentioned. We are looking for a compromise here to still support our working people while giving our business community a little bit of relief, those at least who have minimum wage workers in their business. And so it reads to amend the bill line 16 and 17 on page 2, section 3105, minimum wages. Every employer shall pay each person employed by him wages at a rate not less than $8.25 per hour effective January 15th, not less than $8.75 per hour effective March 1st, 2020, and not less than $9.25 per hour effective, and striking out March 1st, 2022, and changing that to September 1st, 2021, and also to allow Legislative Council to make technical corrections.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment, Vice Speaker, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And again, based on the collaboration, I want to say that I support this amendment and thank the Legislative Secretary for allowing me to be the main co-sponsor on the amendment with her on this bill. Sainamasi.
Thank you. On the amendment, Senator Taitagui, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I can't find it right now, so can you give me a minute and try and get someone to...
All right, everyone, if you go to folders under Bill 20, you go to your floor amendment folder, Bill 24-36. If you could keep your floor amendment folders open concurrently with your bill folders, that would be helpful here.
Madam Speaker, can you name the title of that? Is it, the one I'm seeing here is B24TMBALS?
There is only one amendment right now. Yes, that is it. TMB. Okay. So on the amendment, would you like to be recognized, or would anyone like to be recognized on the amendment? Senator Moylan, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I object to the amendment and like to discuss, please. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, colleagues, for the amendment. I understand the purpose, and it's well thought out. And our situation is that these businesses have been greatly affected by this pandemic, close to 1 year. still not being able to open their doors completely, still having to pay their bills, still having to do all their expenses involved in their businesses. We are hoping a lot of our tourist market coming on back, and I'd just like to refer to, I think, a letter that will be helpful for understanding this bill a little bit more. My colleagues have referred to back to the committee notes, and I'd like to address one in particular. It's from PHR Ken Micronesia, the company that represents Sheraton, Laguna Guam Resort, Hilton, Pacific Islands Club, Hyatt, Tuzbaki Towers, Hotel Nico, Country Club of the Pacific. And it reads, I'll just highlight a few things. It's prior to the pandemic, our island regularly welcomed around 1.5 visitors annually, generating $2.5 billion in business sales and revenues while supporting approximately a third of the island's employment. We have gone from an average occupancy of 89% to 30% in 2020. And if it wasn't for the U.S. Theodore Roosevelt, we'll be in a world of hurt, basically. And our revenue loss was $158 million from 2019 to 2020, and the payroll cost of $67 million is hurting us greatly. Our operating cost of 10% occupancy is not hugely different than it was when we're at 80%, because they must keep their whole hotels operating. Otherwise, the mold and mildew, everything takes over, and all the bugs come on back. And PHR, Ken Micronesia, is one of the largest employers in our island's tourism industry. And we're struggling due to COVID-19, and with the reduced revenues and unknown foreseeable future, we're looking at all the possible ways to cut costs. Unfortunately, this could mean more job losses, and raising the minimum wage at this time would be a final blow to the hotel and restaurant business. And we struggle to regain our footing, and additionally, a wage increase at this time could compound the present situation. And COVID requirements and increased sanitization efforts and personal protective supplies for all workers, all this is cost. I had to disagree with the amendment because 6 months I don't see this bouncing back. We've heard from Guam Visitors Bureau that they're doing their best as well. Even if we did our best, we are not in control of our primary tourist markets, which is Korea and Taiwan and Japan. And those are unknown. We're worried about the different strand of the COVID virus. And we're so concerned about, we open up properly and we don't want to go backwards again, too. So I disagree. I object to the amendment. I understand this purpose. And I do think if we are able to come through this, and the employer is in full control of increasing the wages they so wish, right? And we are talking about a group of minimum wage workers that would be affected by that, and there's no saying why the employer would not be able to do so if they feel fit to do so. So I object to the amendment, and I do thank the authors of the amendment, my colleagues, and the continuous dialogue on this bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment, would anyone like to speak on the amendment? On the amendment? If not, then Senator Shelton, you may close on the amendment.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I ask my colleagues for their support on the amendment to change the effective date of the increase in the minimum wage from 1 year from March 1st and change that to 6 months. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There's been an amendment to change on line 17 on page 2 the words March 1, 2022 to September 1, 2021. All in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. Amendment fails. On the bill, on Bill 24-36, is there anyone who would like to be recognized on the bill? Or Senator Shelton, you're recognized on the bill.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I rise in opposition to this bill, and I do support moving forward with the scheduled minimum wage increase to strengthen our workforce as we recover from the pandemic, and I stand in support of our working people. Allowing the increase to the minimum wage brings balance to the assistance given to both businesses and our working people over the last year. Throughout the pandemic, businesses received substantial federal aid such as grants, rental assistance, PPP, while our working families have relied on only one economic impact payment, a stimulus, and now a second coming out, and unemployment aid for those who have lost their jobs or reduced hours. Madam Speaker, it's also important to note, as the good senator from Jigo behind me pointed out, while Guam debates when to implement a 50-cent increase, our federal counterparts in Congress are discussing a nationwide minimum wage of $15. The upcoming increase means more buying power for many of our island's workers who are struggling to get by. And especially during these difficult times, it is essential that we pay our workforce what they were promised. With that, Madam Speaker, I would like to proffer another amendment. And this amendment is found on page 2, line 16, line 17.
If we could just pause so I can confirm with the clerk. All right, colleagues, the clerk's office is working on uploading this amendment to the drive. If we could all please send our floor amendments to 36glsession@gmail.com. 36glsession, that's all small letters. Please don't send it to the clerk or any other address. Send it to 36glsession@gmail.com. All right, this will be... All right, so it's being uploaded now. If you can refresh your floor amendment folders, please. Bill 24-36, floor amendment folder. All right, you should all be able to find it. Refreshing your folders. All right. This amendment says ALS P2. All right, Senator Shelton, please proceed.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And the amendment is on line 1617, page 2, to amend the bill to read, Section 3105, minimum wages. Every employer shall pay each person employed by him wages at a rate not less than $8.25 an hour, effective January 15th, 2015, not less than $8.75 per hour, effective March 1st, 2020, and not less than striking out $9.25 and changing that to $9.75 per hour effective March 1st, 2022. And of course, to allow Legislative Council to make technical corrections. Madam Speaker, I believe it would be wise for us to take a step back and remember who we work for here in the legislature. I think we should recognize that the need of our workers now is greater, that raising low-wage workers' pay helps our economy. We heard from Dr. Roseanne Jones, economist at the University of Guam, that an increase in minimum wage for these workers would not be a cause of inflationary concern. In fact, economists support private sector wage incentives as the federal government offers unemployment support as an economic stabilizer during the pandemic. Importantly, communities are seeking higher minimum wage rates as an acknowledgement that many of these low-wage occupations are frontline workers on whom basic necessities of food, sanitation, and care are provided at a greater personal risk. The wage increase to $9.25 presents an increase of $4 per day, $20 per week for full-time workers, the very few among us who provide the basic necessities of our economy. We also received testimony from Mr. Tim Fedenko on behalf of the Guam Federation of Teachers, stating that the pay increase may seem small to some, but for others it could be the difference as to whether or not they are able to afford rent, groceries, or other expenses. For those making minimum wage, the 50-cent increase will help them financially, but will in turn provide them with more income to invest in our local economy. Madam Speaker, this amendment that I am proposing would be to increase the minimum wage an additional 50% if we are to wait another year. If we're making our most essential workers in these low-wage positions wait for another year, I think the least we can do is offer them a little bit more when the time comes that they will receive a bump in the minimum wage.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment, would anyone like to speak on the amendment? Senator Moylan, you are recognized on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to my colleague for the amendment. I object to the amendment, Madam Speaker. And again, we don't know the uncertainties of the unforeseen future, and I really believe this will be an irresponsible move on the legislature. Madam Speaker, I also just like to refer to, we're referring back to University of Guam notes, but I also like to refer to in our committee notes a letter from another business establishment, Fruits, and I'll just highlight a couple of sections that was pointed out in their letter. And it reads, as a small business, personal costs are the single largest expense to the company. And our industry is extremely sensitive to higher employee expenses and must quickly adjust staffing to reflect revenue at any given day, month, or year. And raising the minimum wage without the benefit of increased revenue generated by customers increasing purchase has a negative impact on our ability to remain open. Our overall personal costs must be adjusted up, and this will result in an increase in personal operation costs by 12%. And that was just at the 50-cent increase, and raising it to $9.75, that's more than 12% now. And a small business simply cannot afford this without increasing in the revenue, and we don't know that. It's uncertain. And the pandemic had a devastating effect on all small businesses, and we had to lay off employees who have been with us for years. The author of the letter says, I cannot adequately describe the emotional pain a business owner feels at having to advise an employees who have worked hard for them, that you can no longer provide them a job. The author says, it's too late for us senators, but you have the ability to save others. So this proposed increase and the higher increase proposed in this amendment will be the proverbial nail in the coffin for many of them. That's written by Christine Belletto, who had that franchise but had to close it. So I object to the amendment, Madam Speaker, but thank you, colleagues.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment, would anyone like to be recognized on the amendment? Senator, Vice Speaker Munoz-Barnes.
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise in support of this amendment, and as previously noted on the previous amendment, as we look at the testimony that was provided in the committee report and even the statements and the justifications from the author of this amendment, it literally shows on what the difference is to those workers, minimum wage workers, what that 50-cent increase could do, literally in making them be better able to afford groceries and other expenses. And for me, you know, I was willing to work a middle ground and seeing how we can move forward in saying, okay, if we really need it and we really want to help both sides, let's work on that. But that didn't muster up, and this amendment before us literally gives an opportunity saying, okay, we'll hold strong with what is being afforded, but we'll make the effective date for March 1st, 2022. And Madam Speaker, I stand firm in the efforts of saying, you know what? We literally should give our residents, our hard-working folks in the community who are the lowest of the lowest totem pole as far as working in the community, the opportunity to be better able to support their sustainability and the livelihoods of their family. And I continue to hold firm, and like I said, I'm one who can understand, knowing that even my own family members have businesses, and even they have said, okay, if you can't work with a moratorium, what can we do to at least help each other out? And I said, a middle ground works well. And I said, even compared to the rates nationally, we are still way under the wage earning standards. And with the talks right now that's being done to move from the minimum wage standard now up to $15, Madam Speaker, I think our people deserve, especially those that are in the entry-level opportunities of working. So I stand in full support of this amendment, and I'm really hoping that my colleagues can look at that for our people and afford the opportunity to try and appease the concerns of both sides. So I stand in support of this amendment, Madam Speaker. Sainamasi.
Sainamasi. On the amendment, Senator Dueñas, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First of all, I want to say that I know that this conversation is continue to be discussed on the issue of what's going to happen if the national government raises the minimum wage to $15. Of course, Madam Speaker, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize the point is moot here then. Where we're going with this proposal now after the delay to increase now by another 25 cents the minimum wage. But I think that national debate is very vigorous. Because, just to take a moment, we are a closed economy here on Guam. We are a small island that the majority of our workforce is service industry. And I think that's why our businesses have come to us and asked us for this type of relief. In the States, yes, maybe Seattle and New York and Florida and some of the big cities in these states, the huge corporations, Amazon, the list goes on. They have no problem with $15 an hour. In fact, most of them probably even pay more right now with a lot of the demand that's out there. And that's the key, Madam Speaker, demand. We will have to grapple hard on our island if this national minimum wage is raised. We are going to have a serious come to Jesus on our island if that happens. But so are places in some of the more rural parts of the United States of America. Some of the smaller states, Alabama. I could go on. It's probably a moot point also, with the exception of saying not every state and not every economy stateside can handle also a $15 minimum wage. And I think that's going to be the vigorous debate on the floor of our nation, even if the bill is introduced. I bring all this up, Madam Speaker, to come back to every time we talk about minimum wage, this is the battle. Taking care of those at the bottom of the totem pole. But Madam Speaker, I understand, and I read Dr. Jones's testimony, and I understand the economic discussion there. So maybe that's why it's $15 an hour. Why not $20 an hour? Why not $25 an hour if it's going to do so much good? But the thing is that I think one thing that is generally not heavily debated is minimum wage was not designed to be a living wage. It was designed to be an entry-level wage. We need to start talking once again, as our labor force goes back to Department of Labor and all the other programs, the training programs, GCC, UOG, building the workforce, building the skills. Because when the demand is there, $9.75, $10, $11, $12 is meaningless. Because if the demand is there, those companies will pay. In closing, Madam Speaker, once again, not just to go back to Ken Corp, but the entire tourism industry, most of them have laid off anywhere between 20, 30 to 50% of their workforce. If we're saying we're going to pay $9.75 then in the next year, how many people are they going to be able to bring back once again when they have to deal with that compression issue? Are we putting people out of the workforce now because they're going to have to do more with less consistently? And we say we're helping people, but these businesses with these really small margins are going to stay open and get leaner and meaner and probably keep more people out of the workforce than we're purporting to help. This is, once again, a tough discussion, Madam Speaker. But when we're sitting on the floor of this legislature debating economics and what businesses right now can hold on, baby, to stay open and bring their people back, I think we should try to be as responsible as possible. I would love to vote for $9.75. I would love to vote for $10. I'd like to vote for $11. But I don't know what that would do. And so, Madam Speaker, I support the objection by my colleague, and with all the difficulty, because how popular it is to pass something, and tell folks out there, I'm rooting for you. But I don't know if that's true. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment, on the Shelton amendment, would anyone like to be recognized on the amendment? If not, then Senator Shelton, you may close on the amendment.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I think as we begin our plans for recovery, it's imperative that we show our working people, our frontliners, our essential workers, those in entry-level positions, anyone making the minimum wage at this moment, that we will not forget about them. That if they're made to wait a few more months, a whole year actually, that we will compensate them appropriately, not to go back on a promise we made to them just a few months ago in this body. And I'd like to read from an article on the minimum wage that I was looking at a few moments ago. A quote from Alyssa Barron Menza, who is the Vice President of Business for a Minimum Wage, said, "People forget that the federal minimum wage was enacted during the incredibly hard times of the Great Depression. The goal of the minimum wage was to alleviate poverty and to boost consumer spending so that businesses would have someone to sell their products to and services to." And that's exactly what it did. And so in this moment where we are in extreme uncertainty, there's still value in raising the minimum wage to allow for our essential workers, our frontline workers, who are continuing to serve us in these positions, who serve us our food in our restaurants, who bag our groceries, who pump the gas at the gas station, these workers, entry-level workers, that we show that we trust them and we want to empower them to be able to to do the work that they do and to contribute to our economy as well. And with that, I ask for the support of our colleagues. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Legislative Secretary Shelton. On the amendment, there's been an amendment to change 925 on page 2 to read 975. All in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. Amendment fails. On the bill, Senator Shelton, you're still recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. That's all. That was the last amendment that I had. And again, I rise in opposition to the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill, 24-36. Senator Atta, you are recognized on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I've been listening here, the debate going back and forth on the minimum wage issue. And when we look at our minimum wage history and just on our island, we've done pretty good in raising our minimum wage versus the federal minimum wage. When you look at what the federal minimum wage is, it's at $7.25, and that's been since 2009. We recognize and appreciate our workers, our entry workforce individuals who come and want to get a job. And we've recognized that over the years by increasing the minimum wage locally. But now there's this point in time that we're at. Due to no fault of anyone, this COVID has hit us and hit our island hard. We currently have over 30,000 unemployed people. who are looking perhaps just to get a job back, to put food on their table, make a living. And I don't think that delaying the minimum wage increase, that they would oppose to that as well. And we heard in the public testimony that, an individual was making minimum wage and he didn't mind having that delayed. It's about sustaining the businesses that we currently have that are operating. It's about rebuilding our economy. We're there for our frontline, we're there for our workers when we are able to. And I think this is a point in time where we need to help now our businesses, help them to sustain and help them to rebuild and help them to grow. The PUA and unemployment is not going to last forever. And when those folks start losing that income and they're not able to get a job after that because there's no jobs to get because businesses have been closing by all the increases in fees and wages that have been imposed upon them, where are we going to be then? Are we going to force another $2, $3 increase for a minimum wage? We've done what we can to support our minimum wage earners. And this body has done that over the years. But I think we need to look now and see how we can help our businesses sustain. And I ask my colleagues, please, look at what we can do to help sustain the local businesses. I debated back and forth in my mind, what was I going to do with this minimum wage increase? It's not easy. This is a tough decision to make. But that's why we're here, is to make these tough decisions. And I know that our people would want to go back to work. But we need to give them a job to go back to. And we're not going to be able to do that if the businesses continue to close. But Madam Speaker, I humbly ask everyone to really think, to consider. 1 year, it's 1 year is quite a while. But come that 1 year and that individual doesn't have a job after that, then what? They're not going to have to worry about making minimum wage a year from now because they're not going to have a job to be making a minimum wage. Let's give our businesses that opportunity to sustain. Let's give them the opportunity to rebuild and give them the opportunity to grow so that they can turn around and reemploy our people who are currently unemployed. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. It is 12 noon. Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, notwithstanding the House rules, I move to temporarily suspend discussion on second reading and go back to motions.
On the motion, are there any objections? No objection, motion carries. Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to resolve into the Committee of the Whole to conduct the presentation of Resolution Number 9-36 COR relative to congratulating the Honorable Joaquin C. Arriola on the occasion of his retirement after dedicating 67 years to the practice of law and to further recognizing and commending his 67 years of service to the people of Guam as a great legal mind and highly respected lawyer, justice, senator, and leader, and that we to allow the honored guest into the Speaker Antonio R. Unpinco Legislative Hall.
A motion's made to resolve into the Committee of the Whole to conduct the presentation of Resolution Number 9-36 COR and allow honored guests into the Speaker Antonio R. Ampinco Legislative Session Hall. Are there any objections? Hearing no objections, motion carries. We are in recess until 12:15.